The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every eye waiting for the clash. Judge Samuel Alito leaned forward, his expression sharp, his tone carrying the weight of authority. He thought he had the perfect setup, a carefully crafted trap designed to corner Representative Jasmine Crockett and strip her argument bare in front of the nation. But Jasmine wasn't new to pressure. She sat calmly at the witness table, eyes steady, posture unshaken. When Alito posed his loaded question, phrased in a way that suggested contradiction no matter her answer, the room grew tense. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras zoomed in, and the silence was deafening. Alito smirked, confident she would stumble. Yet Crockett didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned into the microphone and dismantled the question piece by piece. Her voice was steady, her words razor-sharp, pointing out how his phrasing twisted the facts, how his assumptions ignored the law itself, and how the very foundation of his so-called trap was hollow. Gasps spread across the room as she quoted precedent after precedent, flipping his challenge back onto him. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "if fairness is truly the standard, then it must be applied equally, not selectively, not strategically." Her delivery carried the weight of truth and the courtroom shifted. Even those who came in skeptical found themselves nodding. Alito's smirk vanished. He tried to interrupt, but Jasmine pressed on, refusing to yield. Her closing line hit like thunder. "This isn't a trap for me. It's a test for justice. And justice demands clarity, not games." The gallery erupted in murmurs, and even the judge's gavel could barely contain the energy in the room. By the time she finished, the so-called trap was nothing but rubble. Headlines later captured the moment as one of the most powerful courtroom exchanges in recent memory. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just avoided the corner, she obliterated it, leaving Judge Alito silent and the nation buzzing. The gallery was still buzzing from Jasmine's dismantling of the judge's question when Alito attempted to reassert control. He straightened in his chair, his voice louder, firmer, as if volume could repair his bruised authority. "Representative Crockett," he said, tapping his gavel for emphasis, "you will answer directly. Did you or did you not contradict your earlier statement?" The question was meant to force her into a yes or no trap. Cameras zoomed closer, the tension doubling. But Jasmine didn't even blink. She leaned forward, her voice calm but commanding. "Your Honor, I will not reduce truth to a trick of phrasing. My statement hasn't contradicted itself, your framing has." The audience stirred again. Her tone wasn't defiant for the sake of theater, it was measured, built on confidence in the facts. She then laid out the timeline step by step, connecting dots so clearly that even the most skeptical observer could see how Alito's version crumbled under its own weight. "Contradiction," she concluded, "only exists when facts collide. Here the facts are aligned. What's colliding is your attempt to distort them with a false premise." That landed like a hammer. Alito opened his mouth, but no words followed. For a split second, the power dynamics in the courtroom shifted completely. The silence in the courtroom was thick, hanging like a storm cloud. Judge Alito's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as though he could will Jasmine into stumbling. But the representative remained steady, her presence unshaken. He tried again, this time shifting tactics. "Representative Crockett, are you suggesting this court has acted improperly?" His tone was sharp, a challenge meant to corner her into either backing down or openly accusing the bench. The crowd collectively inhaled. It was a dangerous question. Jasmine's lips curved into the faintest smile. She leaned closer to the microphone and delivered her response with deliberate precision. "I am suggesting, Your Honor, that every court, every chamber, every institution of power must be held accountable. Accountability does not weaken the system, it strengthens it. And I would expect nothing less from the highest levels of justice." The words struck like lightning. She hadn't accused, but she hadn't bowed either. Instead, she'd flipped the challenge into a declaration of principle, leaving the judge no room to maneuver without exposing bias. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Journalists' pens flew across notepads, already framing the headlines. "Crockett schools Alito on accountability." Alito gripped the bench, visibly unsettled. What was supposed to be his moment of dominance had turned into a masterclass in composure and clarity, and Jasmine Crockett was commanding the stage. Judge Alito adjusted his glasses, clearly trying to regain control of the exchange. His voice dropped lower, more deliberate, as if he believed calm authority could undo the damage. "Representative Crockett, you seem to think you can redefine the scope of this hearing. Let me remind you, this is my courtroom." For a moment, the room froze. That line had weight. It was meant to re-establish dominance, to remind everyone who held the gavel. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She raised her chin slightly, her voice cutting through the air with remarkable steadiness. With respect, Your Honor, it may be your courtroom, but it is the people's justice. That cannot be redefined, not by me, not by you, not by anyone. Justice belongs to the people, and I am here to make sure their voice isn't silenced. The room erupted in hushed gasps. Even some of Alito's allies on the bench shifted uncomfortably. She had just dismantled the very foundation of his authority without ever raising her voice. Reporters typed furiously, headlines forming in real time. Crockett reclaims the courtroom. Alito attempted to interrupt, lifting his gavel, but the audience's energy had already shifted. Jasmine's words were echoing louder than the judge's authority, and for the first time, it looked as though the courtroom itself was slipping out of his hands. Alito's gavel slammed once, the sharp crack echoing through the chamber. "Order," he barked, trying to drown out the murmurs. But the energy had shifted. The people weren't hanging on his authority anymore, they were hanging on Jasmine's every word. He leaned forward, his tone icy. "Representative Crockett, are you implying that this court has failed the people?" It was his last gambit, a question sharpened to corner her into a dangerous admission. Jasmine didn't even hesitate. She clasped her hands, her voice calm yet unshakably firm. "I am saying, Your Honor, that when truth is bent into a weapon, the people are failed. And that is why I will never allow it to go unchallenged, not in this courtroom, not in any forum where justice is at stake." The line hit like thunder. A wave of reaction swept the gallery, gasps, nods, even muffled applause before security quieted the room. Alito's face hardened, but there was no immediate retort. His so-called trap had become a spotlight, and Jasmine was shining in it. For the first time the judge looked cornered. His strategy had unraveled, his authority chipped, and his attempt to silence her had instead amplified her voice. The tension was so sharp it felt like the air itself could break. Judge Alito shifted in his seat, his hand gripping the gavel as though the weight of it could somehow restore control. His eyes scanned the gallery, journalists, legal scholars, everyday citizens, all focused not on him but on Jasmine. He tried one last time to undermine her. His voice was cool, calculated. "Representative Crockett, it seems you've mistaken this proceeding for a political stage. Do you deny that your responses are crafted more for spectacle than for substance? It was meant to sting, to paint her as grandstanding rather than arguing law." But Jasmine didn't even blink. She leaned forward, her tone measured yet piercing. "If substance is what you seek, Your Honor, then I suggest you examine the record. Every fact I've laid out is backed by precedent, by evidence, by truth. The spectacle, respectfully, is not in my words, it is in the attempt to disguise a trap as justice." A murmur swept the courtroom. The words cut with surgical precision, exposing Alito's tactic without a hint of disrespect. For a moment, Alito froze, his rebuttal caught in his throat. The trap he thought he'd set had collapsed in plain view, and the audience saw it clearly. Jasmine didn't stop there. "The people are watching," she added, her voice rising just enough to command the room. "And they deserve to see the difference between theater and truth. I will always stand on the side of truth." Applause broke out despite the judge's glare. Security moved to hush the crowd, but it was too late. The moment belonged to Jasmine Crockett. The courtroom was restless, buzzing with whispers that even the bailiff struggled to quiet. Cameras zoomed in tighter, hungry for every flicker of expression. Judge Alito's jaw was set like stone, but the cracks in his composure were visible now. He tapped the gavel again, slower this time, as if trying to summon patience he didn't have. "Representative Crockett," he said through clenched teeth, "this court does not answer to the applause of a gallery." Jasmine tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but unyielding. "Nor should it, Your Honor. But it must answer to truth, and truth will always earn the people's recognition." The words struck clean and sharp, like a bell ringing in the silence that followed. Alito's eyes narrowed. He had built his reputation on control, on never letting the spotlight shift from his bench. Yet here before the nation the spotlight refused to leave Jasmine. He attempted one last pivot, asking a technical question meant to bury her in legal jargon. But Jasmine was ready. She dismantled it point by point, citing precedents with flawless recall, weaving together the law and the principle behind it so clearly that even non-lawyers in the room could follow. By the time she finished, the gallery erupted again, this time louder, harder to contain. Reporters were already drafting headlines in their minds. Crockett schools Alito in his own courtroom. And Alito, for the first time in memory, had no words left. Alito's silence spoke louder than any ruling. He straightened, clearing his throat, trying to mask the sting of being outmaneuvered. His voice was clipped, almost brittle. "Representative Crockett, let us return to the matter at hand. You seem determined to divert." Jasmine's response was immediate, steady as steel. "On the contrary, Your Honor, I am determined to focus. What you call diversion is simply unwillingness to confront the flaws in this line of questioning. If a path leads only to distortion, the duty is to call it out, not to follow it blindly." The gallery erupted in quiet murmurs again, several heads nodding, some even smiling at her precision. Alito's fingers tightened on the gavel, but he didn't strike it. The judge, who usually commanded absolute control, now looked like a man scrambling for footing. Jasmine pressed the advantage. "Your Honor, justice cannot survive on theatrics. It survives on clarity. And today, clarity has revealed that what was intended as a trap is nothing more than smoke and mirrors." The statement was devastating. It didn't just deflect Alito's challenge, it exposed it. The audience reacted instantly, a wave of gasps and hushed voices sweeping the chamber. For the first time, the judge's authority felt smaller than the truth Jasmine had spoken into the room. Alito's face hardened, his composure cracking further under the weight of Jasmine's words. He leaned forward, his tone edged with frustration. "Representative Crockett, are you accusing this court of deception?" The gallery froze. It was the most dangerous framing yet, a question designed to corner her into a statement that could be spun against her outside the courtroom. But Jasmine remained unshaken. She sat taller, her voice calm, deliberate, unafraid. "I am accusing no one, Your Honor. I am exposing tactics. And when tactics are used to obscure truth, it is my duty to tear them down. Not for my sake, not for yours, but for the people watching who expect fairness, not manipulation." The room erupted in murmurs, some louder this time, harder to contain. The weight of her words lingered in the air, undeniable. Alito's jaw tightened. His so-called trap had been flipped so completely that it now looked like his credibility, not Jasmine's, was on trial. Jasmine didn't let the moment pass. If shining light on a flawed question feels like accusation, perhaps that says more about the question than the answer. That single line landed like a hammer. The crowd gasped, reporters scribbled furiously, and for the first time, Judge Alito looked visibly rattled. The trap had backfired, and the entire nation was watching it happen live. The gallery was electric now, every eye fixed on Jasmine as though the balance of power had completely shifted. Even those who had entered the courtroom expecting Alito's authority to dominate were whispering that the moment had turned historic. Judge Alito adjusted in his seat, his voice lower, more measured, but with a sharp edge. "Representative Crockett, you walked dangerously close to undermining this court's integrity." It was a warning cloaked as a statement, meant to intimidate. But Jasmine only leaned forward, her expression resolute. "With respect, Your Honor," she said, her tone unwavering, "integrity cannot be undermined by truth. If this court's integrity is strong, it will stand on facts. If it shakes at the weight of simple questions, then perhaps it needs reinforcement, not silence." The words detonated in the chamber. Gasps rippled through the audience, and a few even broke into applause before being hushed by guards. Alito froze. His carefully crafted image of unshakable control was slipping further with every exchange. What he had meant to frame as defiance sounded instead like courage. Jasmine didn't stop. "I am not here to weaken this institution. I am here to remind it of its purpose. The people do not fear truth, they fear when truth is hidden. That is the real danger to integrity." The crowd reacted instantly, journalists typing so fast the clatter of keys could be heard across the courtroom. The narrative had shifted completely. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just defending herself, she was defending the very idea of justice. The weight in the room was crushing. Every exchange had chipped away at Alito's authority, and now he looked like a man standing on cracked ice. He gripped his gavel, his voice tight. "Representative Crockett, your words tread dangerously close to contempt." The crowd gasped. It was the last card he could play, the threat of punishment. A move meant to silence her completely. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned closer to the microphone, her tone calm but carrying the full force of conviction. "Your Honor, contempt is not speaking truth. Contempt is abusing power to silence it. If my words strike hard, it is because they expose what should never be hidden. That is not contempt, that is accountability." The courtroom erupted. Some clapped, some cheered before the guards tried to suppress it, but the damage was done. Alito had lost the crowd, and worse, he had lost the narrative. Jasmine's voice rose just enough to ride over the noise. "You cannot trap me with twisted questions, and you cannot silence me with threats. Justice is not a weapon to be wielded, It is a light that belongs to the people. And today that light has burned through every attempt to obscure it. The gallery was on its feet, murmurs swelling into applause that no gavel could quiet. Reporters were already pushing out headlines that would go viral within the hour. Alito sat back, the weight of defeat etched across his face. The trap he had built for Jasmine Crockett had turned into the very pit he fell into. The noise in the courtroom was unlike anything seen before. Cameras flashing, reporters scrambling, the public refusing to be silenced. Judge Alito raised his gavel again, striking it with force. "Order! Order!" he shouted, but the command barely registered. His authority, once unquestionable, was drowned out by the moment. Jasmine Crockett waited calmly for the room to settle just enough, then spoke again. Her voice was steady, but it carried like thunder. "Your Honor, you tried to corner me with words. You tried to twist the truth into a cage. But cages built on deception cannot hold. Not me, not the people, not justice." The gallery gasped, the weight of her words cutting through the noise. She didn't shout, but her conviction made her every syllable ring louder than the gavel. Alito tried to interject, his voice hoarse with frustration. "Representative Crockett." But she didn't let him finish. She pressed forward, her final blow landing with devastating precision. "You asked if I stand against this court. No, Your Honor. I stand for justice. And if this court forgets its duty to it, then it will not be me who stands accused before history." The silence that followed was deafening, and then the room erupted, this time unstoppable. Applause, cheers, even chants of her name filled the chamber. Security tried in vain to restore order, but it was useless. The moment had already transcended the walls of the courtroom. Jasmine Crockett had not only escaped the trap, she had obliterated it, leaving Judge Alito staring into the wreckage of his own failed challenge. The echoes of that day spread far beyond the courtroom walls. Within minutes, clips of Jasmine's exchange with Judge Alito flooded social media. Millions watched her steady dismantling of his questions, replaying the moment she declared, "Cages built on deception cannot hold." Headlines were relentless. Crockett obliterates Alito's trap in courtroom clash. Judge silenced, Jasmine Crockett's words go viral. Historic showdown, people applaud Crockett's stand for justice. News anchors replayed the footage on a loop, analysts scrambling to frame what it meant. Some legal experts admitted they had never seen a sitting judge so thoroughly stripped of control in his own courtroom. On talk shows, panelists argued over whether Jasmine had been bold or reckless. But what mattered most was clear. The public overwhelmingly saw her as fearless. Comment sections overflowed with praise, calling her the voice of reason in a chamber too often dominated by power plays. Even her political rivals, those who had once dismissed her as unseasoned, were forced to acknowledge the scale of the moment. She hadn't just defended herself, she had turned the courtroom into a battlefield and walked away victorious. Judge Alito, meanwhile, released no statement. His silence spoke volumes. The man who once commanded the room had been left staring at the ruins of his own failed strategy. And Jasmine Crockett? She left the courthouse with her head high, knowing that history had just written her name in bold. The fallout was immediate and seismic. In the days that followed, political circles buzzed with one name, Jasmine Crockett. What was expected to be a routine hearing had transformed into a defining moment that rewired the balance of power. Clips of her dismantling Alito weren't just trending, they were dominating. Late-night hosts replayed her lines, calling it, the moment the courtroom belonged to Crockett. Editorial boards praised her composure, noting how she turned a trap into a teaching lesson on justice. On Capitol Hill, the atmosphere shifted. Colleagues who had once underestimated her now spoke with newfound respect. Some whispered that her rise was unstoppable, that she had not only embarrassed a Supreme Court judge but also solidified herself as one of the sharpest voices in American politics. Meanwhile, Alito faced mounting criticism. Legal scholars picked apart his failed strategy, describing it as clumsy and transparent. The optics of being dismantled on live television by a representative reverberated through the legal community. But the most powerful ripple came from the people. Citizens across the country flooded social media with messages of support. Hashtags praising Jasmine trended for days. Grassroots groups began organizing around her words, framing them as a rallying cry for accountability at the highest levels. The political world understood one thing clearly: Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a rising figure anymore. She had become a symbol, someone who could walk into the highest court and walk out stronger, leaving even a judge reeling. Months later, the moment still echoed. Law students studied the exchange as a case in courtroom composure. Political strategists dissected it as a masterclass in turning defense into offense. And ordinary citizens still shared the clip, quoting her words like a mantra. Justice is not a weapon to be wielded, it is a light that belongs to the people. For Jasmine Crockett, the showdown with Judge Alito became more than a viral moment, it became a cornerstone of her legacy. She was no longer just another sharp voice in Congress. She was the figure who walked into the highest court, faced a carefully laid trap, and left unscathed while the judge himself faltered. Her popularity soared. Supporters pointed to that day as proof that courage, clarity, and conviction could break through even the most powerful walls. It wasn't just about winning an argument, it was about redefining what it meant to hold leaders accountable no matter their title. As for Alito, his silence continued. He never publicly addressed the incident, but the absence of a defense spoke louder than any statement. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was already sealed. The clash was remembered not just as a battle between a judge and a representative, but as a moment when truth outshined power. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett stepped firmly into history, not as someone who avoided a trap, but as the woman who obliterated it before the entire nation.